All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for joining for today's session number 23. And we have anonymous mock interviews with hiring managers for QA professionals today. And if you guys are first time here, I will explain like what it is, how it will go. And let me start with introduction of our hiring managers who offered help to participate in today's session. Mike, he's a test architect at Accion Labs. Am I pronouncing right, Mike?
Close enough. Yeah.
Close enough. All right,
Okay.
and we have Adeel, Adeel Mansoor. He's a QA manager, actually QA engineering manager of QA and SDET at ChowNow. Hi, Adeel. You're muted. Yes.
Hi.
All right. And really quick, give me, I'll give you how it works. So we're going to have today two anonymous candidates. So both candidates, they prepared with two questions. Tell about yourself and what did they do at their last projects. And overall, we're going to limit this speech for about 4 minutes. At the same time, Adeel and Mike, they will go with the follow-up questions as usually they do during their interviews with their potential candidates in their regular jobs. And this session will take about from 30 to 45 minutes each. So this session will be about 1 hour and 30 minutes, the maximum. So in the end is the most important. Each candidate will receive the feedback, what went well and what they should improve. And this is the most valuable thing that usually you won't get it during the real interviews. I mean, most of the time you won't get any feedback. And here you have an opportunity to ask us a question as well. So yeah, and quick disclaimer, this is educational event. We do not promise any job opportunities. Even Adeel and Mike, they're real hiring managers. And by the way, guys, Mike and Adeel, are you guys hiring by any chance at this moment?
We are, but I don't know about in the States. We are hiring in India and in Europe.
In the Europe. Adeel, how about you?
Not at the moment, but we will be opening hiring very soon for QA engineers. But we are hiring, like ChowNow engineering as a whole is hiring for a lot of different positions.
Awesome. Awesome. And guys, please join to our Slack channel. All of us, we are there. So we're also posting there our job openings. If you may, if anyone will have, we already have there about 2,000 people. So please welcome. And we are ready to start. Let me stop sharing my screen. Candidate number 1, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Great, great. Could you please share your screen with your resume?
Sure.
All right, perfect. We can see your resume, the first page. Is your resume consist only 1 page?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, candidate number 1, please, before you start, can you tell like what kind of position you are looking for?
I'm actually trying to look for a entry-level software position. I have many years in the QA industry itself, so trying to break into the more technical aspect role.
All right, awesome. So let's get started then. Please tell us about yourself and about your last project.
Sure. Well, generally speaking, I'm a huge, some of my hobbies, I'm a huge sports fan. I actually have a large collection of Star Wars Legos. I'm a huge Star Wars and Lego fan. And so my last Christmas card was me with a picture of all the ones that I built and ones I haven't built. I'm actually also a budding gardener. I'm starting to try to learn how to grow things in my backyard, but for some reason I'm not, it's not working. Everything's dying and stuff. So try to work on that. So that's just kind of a quick overview of some of the things I like to do, some of the hobbies. In terms of my last job or my last project I worked on a web portal that was created, and that web portal was built to put together the company customer bases. Our company merged with another one, and so they wanted to make discounted products for each company available to the other company's customer base. So there was a little web portal that was built, and so what I did was I did a lot of testing using Postman, making sure that any type of APIs that were created or needed to be updated was manifesting itself on the web pages, and the information was correct. Any type of purchases would be reflected on that web page, and then just kind of making sure everything was working properly in terms of the UI and the install flow itself. So kind of general things. So that's my last project that I worked on.
Right, awesome. Adeel, Mike, please.
Okay, so I think, Mike, is it okay if I start?
Yeah, shoot for it.
Yeah. At this point, if I saw your resume for an entry-level software engineering position and the intro given, I would ask you follow up. Like, can you tell me about, what have you done to prepare for a software engineering role? What have you done, and can you talk about any projects you have done, whether at work or learning, that that align with your goal, becoming a software engineer? And I'm guessing when you mean software engineer, maybe you want to dive a little bit into like, the type of projects you've done, front end, back end, database, whatever it may be.
Yes, sure. So what I did was in March, middle March of this past year, or last year rather, 2021, I took a coding boot camp for about 3.5 months. And so I learned full stack engineering. And so it was an introduction to basically just building a web page. There was 3 stacks that were presented. There was the Python stack. We learned some Django in there. And so most of the language that we coded in was through JavaScript with the Python backend. And then we also learned the MERN stack and the Java stack as well too. So most of my projects that I built were basically through the assignments. And at the end, each stack was supposed to have projects built as well too. So that's kind of like my introductory experience into the world of software engineering.
Okay, and I can see the rest of your resume. Maybe you can
Sure.
scroll down just to get a good idea of what you have covered. Okay. All right. Sounds good. And you're looking for software engineering positions, not QA.
Yes, I would like to. Yes.
All right. Sounds good. I think that was just my first one. Mike, do you have any?
Yeah, so hi, candidate number 1. Can you speak to why you would want to switch from a testing, mostly a testing role into a mostly a coding role? What draws you that way?
I feel like just being in the QA world for a long time, I actually want to know how to build the products as well and understand kind of the many technical aspects, like a deeper technical aspect. I was mostly a manual tester for my life. And so I didn't have, I guess my skills get kind of capped. And so, it took me a while to realize this, but I definitely would like to increase in that area to make myself actually more valuable. And I think that the software engineering field is the way to go in that sense.
Suppose there is a role that would utilize your past testing experience and couple that with programming experience, right? Create kind of a role that combine the two together. Would that be at all of interest to you? Or would you just want to like sort of, do a clean slate and just like no more testing, just want to do development?
Ultimately, the goal is for me to be a software engineer, but I think there are many paths to get there.
Yeah.
And so what you mentioned is probably one of the best ways for me to utilize my past experience into that role, meaning I'm perfectly fine continuing to test. I mean, my experience has been that even developers I knew in my company, they actually did a lot of testing too, and it just came part and parcel with the things that they built. So I have absolutely no problem becoming involved in a role that utilizes testing as well as coding. And I think, truth be told, it seems like you can't just do one or the other. It's a little bit of integration between those two skills.
Well, maybe it changes from company to company. There's some truth to that. So the obvious thing, I'm just going to say real quick, just so we can get that passed. Obvious thing will be that you have a technical acumen to chase after, right? You need to know programming, obviously, to to be a programmer. What else do you think? What else do you feel like will be most beneficial for you to prepare yourself for this new developer role?
I think that I have had a long, many years of working with teams and people, specifically with my India team. And I think that I have a good ability to be able to learn from people, from anybody. It doesn't mean that, if they're like entry-level employees or whatever, that I can't learn from it. I think with that, it seems like that soft skill to be able to get along with people and to learn from everybody is something that really can help me. And I found it to be helpful because even with my team in India, people, who were just starting, they had a lot of contributions that they've given to me. So I think that that's a soft skill that is very helpful to be able to get along with teams and work with teams.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Adeel, do you have any more questions you want to ask?
Yeah. Can you maybe tell us if things you've done, as you on your resume, you have your professional experience. I think you touched on one point, communication. Is there anything else you see that you feel that that you've learned that is applicable to the software engineer position? Maybe highlight 2 or 3 things. Give some examples.
Sure. I think one of the things I learned just being in QA is, again, my responsibilities kind of kept growing towards more being like an overseer of projects. And one of the things that I've learned through just being on projects, I've noticed that just cleaning things up is very helpful. Meaning we would actually use Confluence to list out all of our projects in our team, a team of 30 people, and many projects were there. But I think that sometimes because people don't necessarily see it from senior management, they just kind of put stuff on there. So I took it upon myself to reorganize that and just kind of clean things up, putting things together in more of an organized fashion. And what that helped was actually to be able to allow other people to find information for our projects, different teams. And so I think my strength is I'm actually good at organizing things and making things a little bit easier to understand. because I think that sometimes when, when you have a perspective of doing this, I know and I understand this, sometimes that doesn't necessarily translate into other people understanding what you're doing. So I think that was one of my skills. I think my other skill that I actually developed over the years was being able to try to get people to do to negotiate with other teams and get them to kind of help us in doing our priority issues or addressing priority defects. We would write defects that were high priority to us, but for other teams, it was low priority. And so just going over there and just trying to negotiate things. I think that I try to develop that skill, trying to, if I help you, you can help us, we can help you, etc. So that's some of the stuff. So just off the top of my head, those are a couple of things I feel like I grew, mostly soft skills. So.
Yeah, sounds good. Also, you've gone to a boot camp, you've done full stack, you've done front end, you've back end. What are out of that boot camp experience? What is the thing you're most interested in, or thing that that appeals to you the most, and also follow that up with an example from the boot camp. Dive a little bit deeper into a project that that you did that aligns with that interest.
Sure. One of the things that I think it would be nice is, well, I mean, that was one of my projects that I was working on, was a fantasy football data aggregator. And so I'm a huge, football fan. So all these years I've been playing fantasy football and stuff. And I actually thought maybe I could create a website where I could use the NFL.com API and get their information to populate on my web page. And then so that way I can actually, have up-to-date information and make it something that I can use to help me in my fantasy. And my ultimate goal was to actually maybe think about using that and maybe even monetizing it, just going on YouTube, etc. I mean, that was the far end goal, but just being able to understand how to populate API information on a web page, create forms so that people can, enter information, spit out information that in an organized way, list the running backs, top performers, etc. Those are the things. So that kind of interested me, the whole API usage for websites. So that's kind of something that I would like to pursue.
Awesome. Can you dive a little bit, like what were the language, what was the computer language, the programming language and the stack you used for your fantasy football data aggregator?
Sure, I was using Python as the backend, and so I didn't finish the project yet, but it was that was the backend, and then the front end was all JavaScript. And so just using that information out, Python was basically the language I was using.
Okay, and within Python, what libraries did you use to achieve your goal? Like, I'm just taking that as an example as the backend. Can you just tell me what libraries were you using, and just at a sort of a still high level, but a little bit deeper detail into what your backend app was actually doing?
The API library, I don't remember exactly what library I was using.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was a wrong.
And that's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was a while since I put that together, so I don't remember.
Okay, and that's okay. But do you remember what the app was doing? Can you just the functionality, the backend was?
Sure.
Yeah.
It was a very simple app in terms of what it would do is I would try to have a listing of the different positions. And then when I would click running back, it would list out the stats for who's, how many yards that person would have. And it would be the same for the other positions as well too. So it would just get the information and just populate it through. And it wasn't fancy, it wasn't nice, but that's basically the start. And so I wanted to try to simplify it so that it's a weekly performance, but at the time it was just up to the cumulative stats at that point. So it was just basically a little link to the running back example, and then it would just populate that information with total yardage, total touchdowns.
Nice, cool, awesome, thank you.
If you guys don't have any follow-up questions, maybe we can move to the feedback.
I can give I have a bunch of things I wrote down, so I'll give you a few pointers here to candidate number one. And obviously we have limited time and we're not actually hiring, so some of these things just take it with a grain of salt. Maybe you want to kind of re-juggle what I'm saying and put it contextually into your situation, right? So not everything I say might make sense at all. Number one is that you do in this resume that you're showing, it's all QA experience or testing experience, and nothing wrong with that. It is live, is what it is. I would kind of have you, I would advise you to look over this and find out things that you think could be like quote unquote selling points as a software engineer, right? Software developer. By trade and by activity, right? A developer and the testers do different things on their day-to-day. That's just the way it works, right? But if a developer could do some of the things that the testers would also do, ergo the way they think as well, the way they take on an issue or a problem, right? That potentially makes that developer a much better one. And so what is it that you do as a tester that you think that these are the things that the testers do or think or approach that could really help a developer, and find those and see, find a way to kind of highlight that in your resume, so that it possibly could give you a much better leg up, right? Unless you also have actual developer experience, like as a job or something like that. That's you want to make good use of what you have and sort of highlight those things, right? So if you have things like, I work with developers to troubleshoot issues, right? We deal with database outages, whatever, something that's very technical, that's very much in the developer's realm. Those things you want to highlight, right? Or I create test data for maybe some kind of edge case conditions and help the developer to get a better coverage. Something to that effect would be helpful, I think. Okay, and again, you looks like you have been working since 2003, so that's a lot of experience. So definitely, there's a lot of things you can draw from. See if that can help you in any ways. Maybe you'll just highlight your resume a little bit better. Second thing I would say is that you had some developer experience now. You took the boot camp. You play with technology a little bit. I'm going to leave the language part aside for a second, right? This is not an argument against or for Python per se, but if I were to take your resume for an entry-level software engineer, and I would look at, let's just say, another resume for someone applying for the same position, but this person have gone through a longer period of training, perhaps like a 4-year bachelor degree or something like that, right? Then how could I make yours, or how would I look at yours and say this guy has more potential? What I said earlier on was one point. The other thing is that if I look at just the sort of years of training, right, 4-year college or university, and then 3.5-month boot camp, it's really hard to stack that up, right? So maybe you could supplant that, add that a little bit by creating your own project, and you had this fantasy football idea. I think that was great. These are the things. And there are many other kind of projects like that I would say, I call them ground zero projects. Basically, you start from scratch. Start with blank nothing and use whatever skills you have, right? And Google search page and just go for it. Do everything, right? Write an API, do your web page, and maybe even create multiple types of web pages. Maybe you can create like a single page application. Maybe you can create something that's mobile friendly, reactive, whatever you want to do, and just use that example, use that opportunity to grow this application, which you are obviously passionate about, but also use that opportunity to learn different technology, and then post all that as open source, right? Because anyway, and if you want to make money, that can come later. But if you put it as open source, number one, you're kind of already in the know, right? People who does open source are kind of like the elites, right? Developer kind of thing. So you already in that zone. And if you put a code up there, you're saying that I may have mistakes, I may not be the most experienced, but I'll let you see my code so you can get a taste of what I'm doing. And thirdly, I am actually trying to create an application that's near to real world that can be used, and you can see the progression of what I'm doing, right? So that would actually highlight you as a candidate better than someone who looking for the same position but have not had actual project experience. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it was actually very helpful. I was on mute because I was writing down all your suggestions and notes. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. Awesome. I agree with everything Mike says. I'm going to try to highlight maybe some of the differences. I really liked in when you're highlighting your when you were highlighting your communication, some of the as you described it, some of your strong soft skills. I think they hit a really good balance: communication, diversity, written communication. When you talked about, I believe Confluence, was it, where you reorganize data, information so it's more easily accessible, and just the inter-team collaboration as well is a big part of it. I think those are really strong points, strong highlights. Also, when you talked about the fantasy football data aggregator, it was a very good high level explanation. And I think one thing to keep in mind is when you are, software engineer kind of positions, they'll want to ask about details about your projects. So even if it's been a few months since you did that project, if you're going to talk about it, if it's going to come up, and more than likely it will come up, you want to just update in your mind, what you did there, go over it again, so you can talk about it a little bit more and go a little bit more in depth on those points. Also, if this was if this was an actual, if this was like more of an engineer, software engineer, developer focused interview, also be ready to, live coding. That's something you have to be prepared for. Let's see here. I think to build on what Mike's point was around reworking your resume, some things you can consider doing is actually add, those selling points, add that you were at a boot camp, put that duration in there. If you have any projects in GitHub, link those projects, put a link to your projects here, and maybe even expand on it a little bit, share some details about it. Let's see here. Lastly, this is neither right or wrong, so just something to bring to your attention. When you started talking about yourself, you started with, personal interest, which isn't bad, which is a good way to build connection. But just know that that first 2-3 minutes when you are talking about yourself, that slot is very important. So think about really what you want to communicate. If you really want to communicate that, then go for it. But finally, like the selling points shouldn't just be in your resume, but they should also be talking points when you're talking about yourself, introducing yourself, because you do have a lot of good, strong points to share. So something I would keep in mind.
I really appreciate that. So I was taking notes on that as well too. So those are all good feedback. I do have one question generally, if that's okay. So since I have many years of QA experience, should I pivot and pursue a QA engineering position first, based on that?
I think that's a tough one. That's a more of your career goals. You have to answer that question for yourself. I think there may be other people listening in, viewing it. The problem you have is like your first 5 years in a certain field within engineering. It's easier to make a switch to another field. The reason is, what is the reason? The reason is that because you have really, once you go above 5 years, even 4 years, you become very high demand in the particular area of focus that you are in. So if you're in QA, what's going to be the thing you need to ask yourself is, you're going to have an easier time finding a QA engineer position. You're going to get paid more as a QA engineer. How important is it for you to make the switch to an entry-level software engineer position? So it's a question really for yourself. Mike, Evgeny, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say something from a personal opinion. So again, just, please don't be offended by what I say, but and I'm sure they've seen, and many people have seen this. I've seen this firsthand, right? People come into this sort of QA engineer, test automation engineer role as a stepping stone, right, into something else. And that in itself may work, but there's a lot of rippling effects out of that, right? First of all, if you're in my team, for example, and you are a automation engineer, that's how I'm going to treat you that way. I'm going to invest my time and the resources, and I'll put things and people around you to help you to be a better of that. But if I know that you're going to be jumping anyway, right, then I'm not going to do it, right? And so then when I do find out, oh, in fact, you're jumping because you want to be a software engineer, right? That leaves some sort of bad taste in the mouth and that sort of thing. You really don't want to do that, right? If you want to be an engineer, just go for it. You might have to start, a little bit lower than what you think you might qualify for, but just go straight in for that and let the organization or that team build you up and help you to become a more mature and more senior, software engineer. Right? That's a better path that way than go, let me just do QA because I'm better at QA. And okay, now that I have some programming skills and a better resume, let me jump off, right? Like that. It's just, and like what Adeel say, that's actually a longer route. And most likely you're going to take a few more dips, both in positions and probably in pay as well. I think that is also true. And if you still like testing to some extent, test automation engineer is I think it's still very lucrative, right? It's a very lucrative position, and there's still a lot of, it's a very high ceiling as to what you can do from that point, right? There's a lot of things you can do. I have seen people, I know people who start as test automation engineer, maybe junior or whatever, they're learning the skills, they got better, and then move into this, kind of like a test architect, if you will, that's really looking out in the space of continuous testing. It's almost like DevOps plus testing, and and so that can be a very interesting if you like to do something like that, right? But if you just want to be a software software engineer, a developer, just buckle up and just go for it, right? I say full in. It's probably better.
I really appreciate that. I think that's actually really awesome feedback that you've given me. So very good points for me to consider. So I really appreciate the time you guys gave me.
Yeah, the last thing I can add I do recruiting, right? And obviously what Mike said, I 100% agree. It's really hard. Well, first of all, there is not many positions that are for junior or entry-level positions. Unfortunately, this is the nature of the market. The majority of opening are for senior or mid-level engineers, right? So you're already narrowing down your search for entry-level, and within entry-level, it's even harder because the competition is cutting throat. It's really big competition for entry level. You're competing with QA like you who want to switch to engineering roles. You're competing with a bootcamp graduates who who will flooded actually the market right now, and you're competing with the graduates from with the computer science degrees, right? So you definitely need to distinguish yourself here. And your resume right now, it doesn't say anything about that. You are, why should I pick you for this entry-level position? And just all points that Mike gave you, please make notes and update the resume accordingly to software engineering position, not QA. And again, like I want to repeat this again, because your resume is for QA position. Also another thing that Mike and Adeel said about moving to QA engineering, or actually SDET role or test engineering role, this is definitely would be, I mean, if you go to the interview and you would say that your goal is getting into software engineering, but as a temporary position, you want to go for SDET, this is not a good dialogue to start with. Nobody, I mean, no one would like to invest their time just to take you and, you know, to transition to another role. However, it happened. I mean, it's not something that it's never happened. I heard these stories when people were accepted for entry-level engineering position, but not many stories, right? So just moving from SDET role, because this is more technical position, and unfortunately, it's a big gap between manual QA to software engineering. It's a huge gap. It's two different worlds. But software test engineering roles, it's closer because it's already actually technical. It's a coding. Your learning curve would be shorter compared to what you have right now, even with a boot camp. And you know, just for your consideration. Anyway, I hope candidate number one, it was useful for you, and we wish you good luck with your job search.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just the philosophical mental mindset, I think it was a big help on me kind of setting my path straight. So I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And you can stop sharing your screen. Candidate number two, how are you? Can you hear us? Can you?
I'm fine. Yourself?